My name is Savannah Cole. I'm 33 years old, and by the time my marriage ended, I had already learned something ugly about betrayal. It rarely arrives with enough noise to warn you. You think it will sound like shouting, a slammed door, a confession hurled across a kitchen so hard it leaves a mark on the walls. Something cinematic. Something you can point to later and say, there, that was the moment everything broke. But sometimes betrayal is quieter than that. Sometimes it is a warm afternoon, a clean driveway, a cracked sliding glass door, two familiar voices speaking in the calm, practical tone people use when they think they are discussing logistics instead of destroying a life. I'm an estate attorney. That matters. Not because it made me smarter than the people who tried to use me, but because it meant I understood exactly what they were planning while they were still smiling about it. My husband was Liam Cole, 36. A financial advisor with polished manners and the kind of face people trusted before he even opened his mouth. He knew how to make a room bend toward him. He knew how to make women feel chosen and men feel comfortable and older clients feel safe with their retirement accounts. When I met him, I thought what I was seeing was steadiness. I was 24 when I fell in love with him, 27 when I married him. By 33, I found out I had spent 6 years sleeping beside a man who had been measuring me like an investment. Liam had a younger sister, Brooke Cole, 29. She worked administrative support at a real estate office, made just enough to stay tired, and lived in a one-bedroom apartment that always seemed one missed payment away from becoming somebody else's problem. Brooke was always around. Holidays, Sunday dinners, last-minute drop-ins, birthdays, cookouts. She knew where we kept the wine glasses in our kitchen and which floorboard near the stairs creaked if you stepped too hard. I used to think that was what closeness looked like. Family, familiarity, harmless overpresence. I was wrong. My mother, Margaret Dawson, was turning 60 on March 15th. She had been a pediatrician for decades before retiring, and she moved through life with the kind of competence that made everyone else around her seem slightly underprepared. My father died when I was 14. He left a life insurance payout that my mother protected, invested, and grew with the same patience she used on everything that mattered. By the time she turned 60, her estate was worth just over $2 million. Paid off house, retirement accounts, investment portfolio, everything documented, everything clean. I was her only child. I was also the sole beneficiary. I had drafted her estate plan myself. Every clause, every signature line, every safeguard. I knew where the pressure points were because protecting families from greed was part of what I did for a living. I understood how fast money could turn grief into appetite. I understood how inheritance, if handled carelessly, could become bait. Liam knew all of that. I had told him early in our marriage because we were building a financial life together, or at least I thought we were. I believed in transparency then. I remember sitting across from him at our kitchen table, explaining that if my mother ever passed, anything I inherited would remain separate property under state law as long as it was never commingled with marital assets. He had nodded slowly, like a man listening respectfully to something important. That's smart, he told me. Your mother planned well. At the time, I loved him a little more for saying that. He didn't flinch, didn't joke, didn't get greedy-eyed, didn't start asking questions that felt too interested. He acted like a mature husband hearing ordinary legal information from his wife. Now I know that some men don't show greed because they understand it's more profitable to look patient. 6 weeks before my mother's birthday, I left a client meeting early after it was canceled at the last minute. It was a Wednesday, 2:15 in the afternoon. When I turned into the driveway, I saw Liam's BMW first. That part didn't register as strange. He sometimes worked from home midweek. What stopped me was the white Nissan parked behind it, Brooke's car. Her transmission had been dying for months. You could hear that car before you saw it, a metallic shudder like it was arguing with itself. Brooke never came over on weekdays. She was supposed to be at work, and something about the way her car sat behind Liam's, tucked in close like it belonged there, made the back of my neck go cold. I sat in my own car for maybe 3 seconds, then 5. Then I killed the engine and stayed very still. It wasn't suspicion yet. Suspicion is messy, emotional. This was cleaner than that, more physical. Something in me tightened, the way your body tightens when you smell smoke before you find the fire. I didn't go through the front door. I walked around the side of the house instead, through the narrow gate to the backyard patio. The air was warm, bright, normal. The kind of afternoon that should have made everything feel harmless. The sliding glass door to the living room was cracked open a few inches. Liam liked to do that when the weather was nice. I heard Brooke first. Not laughter, not anything intimate in the obvious sense, just her voice, low and impatient. How much longer are we supposed to wait? I stopped so fast my heel scraped the concrete. Then Liam answered, Margaret's healthy. She could live another 20 years. Brooke made a sharp sound, half laugh, half irritation. I'm not waiting 20 years. I moved closer to the door, just enough to see them through the gap in the curtain. They were on my couch, too close. Her legs draped across his lap, like that position had been practiced enough to stop feeling risky. His hand resting on her knee with the kind of absent ownership that made my stomach turn over once, hard, then go completely still. This was not a mistake. This was routine. Liam's voice stayed calm. We won't have to. Savannah trusts me. When the inheritance comes, I move it into our joint investment account. She signs because I'm her husband and her advisor. Once it's commingled, it becomes marital property. Brooke said, then you file. Then he said, then I take half. And after a beat, in a voice so relaxed it nearly made me dizzy, he added, and we split it. I didn't gasp. I didn't cry. I didn't burst through the door and throw something, even though later people would probably imagine that would have been the natural response. But there is nothing natural about hearing your husband discuss your mother's death and your financial future like he's explaining a retirement strategy to a client. Brooke's fingers slid over his wrist. And if she hesitates? She won't. His answer came fast, confident. I've been planting it for 2 years. Every time finances come up, I mention consolidating, tax efficiency, simplicity, long-term planning. She's almost there. My hand moved before I consciously decided to move it. I pulled out my phone, opened the recording app, pressed record. Brooke laughed then, light and ugly. You really married her for the money. Liam didn't deny it. He leaned back against my couch and said, I married her because she's smart, predictable, and her mother is sitting on $2 million with one beneficiary. That's not greed, Brooke. That's positioning. Something changed inside me when he said predictable. Not because it hurt, because it clarified. Every conversation about finances, every gentle suggestion, every time he asked how my mother was doing with that soft, attentive expression I used to think meant concern. Every extra visit from Brooke that now rearranged themselves in my memory into check-ins, updates, strategy meetings disguised as family closeness. I understood the architecture of it all at once. The affair was there too, obvious now in the way her body folded into his without effort, but somehow even that sat beneath the deeper wound. They weren't only betraying me physically, they had built a plan around my trust, around my profession, around my mother's future death, around the assumption that I would never see them clearly until it was too late. I held the phone near the opening in the door and kept recording. Every word, every laugh, every disgusting, practical little detail. By the time I finally stepped back from the patio, I didn't feel shattered. I felt cold, structured, dangerously calm. And that was the moment my marriage actually ended. Not when I heard the affair, not when I understood the fraud, but when I realized they still believed I was the easiest person in the room to outplay. The recording was 4 minutes and 11 seconds long. I listened to it 3 times in my office that afternoon, sitting perfectly still at my desk while the air conditioning hummed above me like nothing in the world had changed. By the second replay, the shock had already burned off. By the third, I wasn't listening as a wife anymore. I was listening as an attorney. Every sentence they said had weight. Every phrase had legal consequence. Intent, conspiracy, premeditation, fraud through commingling. It wasn't vague, it wasn't emotional, it was structured, planned. They thought they were being clever. They were being thorough. That was their mistake. I picked up my phone and called Sabrina Knox. She was a senior partner at my firm, 15 years deep into family law and estate litigation. The kind of woman who didn't react loudly to anything because she had already seen worse. If you brought Sabrina a disaster, she didn't panic. She categorized it. Sabrina, I said when she answered, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me. I need you to listen to something. She didn't ask questions. She never did. I walked into her office 10 minutes later, closed the door behind me, and pressed play. 4 minutes and 11 seconds. She didn't interrupt once, didn't shift in her chair, didn't even reach for a pen. She just listened, eyes fixed somewhere slightly past me, like she was already mapping out the case in her head. When it ended, she waited a full second before speaking. Your husband and his sister, she said evenly, are planning to defraud you of your inheritance through asset commingling and subsequent divorce. Yes. And you recorded this yourself? Yes. She nodded once. This is a one-party consent state. You were present. The recording is admissible. I know. Her eyes flicked to mine then, just briefly, a small acknowledgement that I wasn't bringing her a problem I didn't understand. What do you want to do? She asked. And that was the moment everything could have gone in a different direction. I could have confronted Liam privately. I could have filed quietly, walked away clean, let the betrayal stay contained inside paperwork and closed doors. But all I could see when I closed my eyes was my mother standing in her kitchen, trusting me to protect what my father had left her, trusting me to protect her. And all I could hear was Liam's voice calling me predictable. I said slowly, to play that recording at my mother's 60th birthday party. Sabrina was silent for exactly 5 seconds. Not shocked, just recalibrating. Then she said, I'll draft the divorce petition. A pause. You bring the speakers. The next 6 weeks were the most controlled period of my life. Not the most emotional, not the most painful, the most precise. I didn't confront Liam, not once. I didn't change my tone with him, didn't pull away, didn't even reduce conversation. If anything, I became slightly more attentive because I needed him exactly where he was. Comfortable, confident, unaware, predictable. The first thing I did was secure every asset he could touch. Our joint savings account had $34,000 in it. I withdrew 17, my half, and moved it into a new account at a different bank under my name only. Clean separation, documented, legal. I moved my personal retirement funds off the platform he had access to. Changed passwords on every account. Enabled two-factor authentication on anything remotely financial. I didn't rush. I didn't make it look like a reaction. I made it look like routine financial housekeeping. The second thing I did was protect my mother. That part mattered more. I reopened her estate file and redrafted key sections, adding a spendthrift clause strong enough to block any future spouse from accessing inherited funds under any circumstances. I tightened language around distribution, added structural barriers, filed the amendment with the county quietly, without ceremony. Liam never noticed. Of course he didn't. He thought the plan was already working. The third thing I did was build evidence. I went back through every text message Liam had sent me over the past 2 years. At first, it felt tedious. Then it felt horrifying. 14 separate instances. 14. Each one subtle, harmless on the surface. We should think about consolidating accounts eventually. It'll simplify things. Tax efficiency would be better if everything was under one umbrella. When your mom's estate transfers, we should plan ahead so we don't lose money unnecessarily. Tax efficiency. That phrase showed up 5 times. Every single message was a breadcrumb in a trail I hadn't realized I was walking. I screenshotted all of them, saved digital copies, printed physical ones, gave everything to Sabrina. When I handed her the stack, she flipped through the pages once and said, "This isn't just intent. This is pattern." I know. You've been married to a man who's been grooming a financial setup for 2 years. I didn't respond to that, because saying it out loud would have made it real in a way I wasn't ready to feel yet. And then there was the party. My mother's 60th birthday, March 15th. I planned it myself, not because I had to, because I wanted control over every variable. The guest list was deliberate. 53 people, family on both sides, friends, neighbors, Liam's parents, his cousins, college friends, people who knew him well enough that their reactions would matter. And Brooke. I made sure Brooke would be there. I texted her personally. "I'm so glad you can make it. It wouldn't feel right without you." She responded with a heart emoji and said she wouldn't miss it. I believed her. She had too much invested not to show up. The venue was my mother's backyard, transformed under a white tent with string lights woven overhead. Catering, open bar, a DJ with a full speaker system, 4 speakers, surround setup, designed for music that filled space evenly. I chose that setup very carefully. If I was going to play the truth, I wanted it to reach every corner of the room. The day of the party, everything looked perfect. Painfully, deceptively perfect. Liam wore a tailored blue suit. Crisp. Effortless. The version of himself that had fooled me for years, standing right in front of me like nothing had changed. He kissed my cheek when guests arrived, poured drinks, shook hands, smiled. Brooke arrived 20 minutes later. She wore a red dress that was too expensive for her life and too intentional to be casual. Tight, new, attention-catching. She moved through the party with a brightness that didn't come from happiness. It came from anticipation. I watched her longer than I should have. There was something in the way she carried herself, subtle but unmistakable, a glow that didn't belong to the setting. I had seen it before in friends, in clients, in women standing on the edge of revealing something that would change how everyone saw them. A secret that wanted to be announced. The first 2 hours passed like any other family event. Dinner, laughter. My mother gave a speech about turning 60 and still being able to outrun her cardiologist. People laughed. Glasses clinked. The air stayed warm and easy. Liam gave a toast about family, about loyalty, about how lucky he felt to be part of ours. I stood beside him while he spoke and wondered if he could hear himself, if the words sounded different inside his head, or if he had practiced this level of performance long enough that even lies felt natural on his tongue. By 7:30 p.m., dessert had been served. The cake was cut. People were relaxed, open, vulnerable, exactly the way you want them before something breaks. And that was when Brooke stood up. She tapped her glass lightly with a spoon. A small sound, but it cut through the music immediately. I felt something shift. This wasn't part of the plan. I hadn't scheduled a speech for her. She smiled at the room, wide and bright. "I know tonight is about Margaret," she said, voice sweet, almost apologetic, "and I don't want to take attention away." A pause. "But I have some news I think this family should celebrate together." My eyes moved to Liam. He was already looking at her, and something passed between them. Not surprise. Recognition. Agreement. Like a signal had just been confirmed. My fingers curled slightly at my sides. This was new. Unplanned. Dangerous. Brooke placed a hand lightly over her stomach. "I'm pregnant." The reaction was immediate. Gasps. Laughter. Voices overlapping in congratulations. Her mother stood up halfway out of her chair. "Oh my God, Brooke!" And then someone asked the question that mattered. "Who's the father?" The room leaned in. Just slightly. Just enough. Brooke didn't answer right away. She looked at Liam, and this time he didn't look away. Her voice softened. "The father is someone I love very much." The air shifted. You could feel it, like pressure dropping before a storm. "I think," she added gently, "it's time we stop hiding." And then she reached for his hand, my husband's hand, and he didn't pull away. That was the moment everything accelerated, not collapsed. Accelerated. Because whatever they had planned, whatever timeline they had built for themselves, they had just moved it forward. And they had done it in a room full of witnesses, which meant I didn't have to wait anymore. I stood up slowly, calmly, and for the first time that night, I spoke. "Before anyone reacts," I said, my voice cutting cleanly through the room, "I have something to add." I could feel every eye in the room turn toward me. Not curious. Not yet. Just attentive in that polite, social way. People shift their focus when something unexpected interrupts the rhythm of a celebration. Brooke's hand was still wrapped around Liam's. My husband. Her brother. The word twisted in my mind, but I didn't let it show. My mother was looking at me now, then at them, then back at me again. Confusion was already setting in across her face, like her brain was trying to rearrange reality fast enough to make what she was seeing make sense. It wouldn't. Not without help. So I gave it to her. I walked toward the DJ booth. Slow. Measured. Not a single rushed step. Later, someone would tell me that was the part they couldn't stop thinking about. The way I moved, like I wasn't walking into chaos, like I was just going to change a song. Maybe that's exactly what I was doing. I reached the booth, leaned down, and picked up the auxiliary cable. My hands didn't shake, not even a little. I plugged my phone into the system, watched the small flicker of connection as the speakers adjusted, the music cutting out mid-beat. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy. Waiting. I straightened and turned back to the room. 53 people. Friends, family, neighbors, colleagues. All of them standing in a moment that still hadn't decided what it was yet. "I recorded something 6 weeks ago," I said. My voice carried cleanly through the speakers. "I think it's relevant to what was just announced." Liam took a step forward. "Savannah." "Don't," I said without raising my voice. "Just one word. Flat. Final." He stopped. Not because he agreed. Because he understood. There was a difference. I tapped my screen. And at exactly 7:42 p.m., I pressed play. His voice came through first. Clear. Familiar. Unmistakable. "How much longer are we supposed to wait?" A ripple moved through the crowd. Not panic. Recognition. People leaning closer to the sound, trying to place what they were hearing. Then Brooke's voice followed. "I'm not waiting 20 years. Someone near the bar let out a small, confused laugh that died almost immediately. And then Liam again. "Savannah, trust me. When the inheritance comes, I'll move it into our joint investment account." The room shifted. You could feel it, like the exact second a floor gives way under too much weight. She'll sign because I'm her husband and her advisor. My mother's hand tightened around her fork. Once it's commingled, it becomes marital property. A glass slipped somewhere in the back and shattered against the ground. No one reacted. Then I file. I take half. Brooke's recorded voice, and we split it. I didn't look at the speakers. I didn't need to. I watched the room instead. Watched understanding spread. It moved person to person, expression to expression, like ink soaking into paper. Liam's mother's hand went to her chest. His father's jaw locked so tight I could see the muscle jump. Brooke's smile was gone now. Completely. Replaced by something thinner. Sharper. Fear. Turn it off, Liam said, louder this time. Savannah, turn it off right now. I didn't even glance at him. Sit down. He didn't sit. But he didn't move forward either. Because now it wasn't just me standing there. It was 53 witnesses. And his own voice was still filling the space between us. You married her for the money. Brooke's laugh. I married her because she's smart, predictable. The word hit the room differently this time. And her mother is sitting on $2 million with one beneficiary. My mother set her plate down. Very slowly. Like she was afraid her hands might betray her if she moved too quickly. That's not greed, Liam's voice continued. That's positioning. By the second minute, no one was speaking. By the third, no one was moving. By the fourth, the entire room had stopped being a party. It had become evidence. 4 minutes and 11 seconds. Every word, every plan, every quiet, calculated decision they thought would never be heard outside my living room. Broadcast through 4 speakers into a space filled with people who now understood exactly what kind of man Liam Cole was. Exactly what kind of woman Brooke had chosen to be. When the recording ended, the silence that followed was heavier than anything I had ever felt. It wasn't shock. Not anymore. It was certainty. I stepped away from the booth and faced them fully. That, I said, is my husband and his sister planning to steal my mother's inheritance. Using me. No one interrupted. No one defended them. There was nothing left to misunderstand. Brooke moved first. Of course she did. Her instincts had always been faster than Liam's. She turned toward the edge of the tent, already stepping away, already calculating distance, exit, escape. But she didn't make it far. My mother's friend, Vivian, stepped into her path. Not aggressively, not loudly. She just stood there. A 60-year-old woman with a quiet spine and a look that said not tonight. Sit down, Vivian said gently. Brooke's eyes flicked around the room, looking for support, finding none. Liam's mother stood up slowly. Her hands were shaking now. Liam, she said, her voice breaking under the weight of everything she had just heard. Tell me this isn't true. He swallowed, looked at her, looked at me, looked at the ground. Mom, it's not what it sounds like. It was a weak sentence. He knew it. Everyone knew it. Answer the question, she said, sharper now. Did you plan this? He hesitated. That was enough. But then he made it worse. We were just talking, he said. It wasn't a real plan. A sound came from somewhere behind me. Disbelief. Soft. Broken. His father stood. Clyde Cole, a quiet man who rarely raised his voice and never needed to. He looked at his son, then at his daughter, then at me. And when he spoke, his voice didn't shake at all. Savannah, he said, I'm sorry. That was it. No excuses. No softening. Just truth. He walked toward me, extended his hand. I took it. His grip was firm. Grounding. Then he turned back to Liam and Brooke. Don't come to my house, he said. Either of you. The words landed harder than shouting ever could have. Don't call. Don't show up. A pause. Whatever you've built with this. His eyes moved between them. And you build it alone. Then he took his wife's arm and led her out. Just like that. He chose. In front of everyone. And 53 people watched a father walk away from his children because of what they had done. The party didn't end all at once. It unraveled. People began leaving in small groups. Quiet conversations. Hugs pressed tightly around my mother. Eyes that avoided Liam and Brooke like proximity alone might contaminate something. Brooke eventually slipped out. No announcement. No apology. Just gone. Liam stayed. Standing in the wreckage of a life he had been so sure he could control. Savannah, he said finally, his voice low now, stripped of its usual polish. We need to talk. I looked at him. Really looked at him. And for the first time in 6 years, I saw him clearly. No, I said. Simple. Clean. Final. Then I turned away from him, and that was the moment he lost everything that actually mattered. The house was quiet 20 minutes later. Not empty, just hollowed out. The kind of quiet that settles after something irreversible has already happened and there's nothing left to interrupt it. I found my mother in the kitchen. She was standing at the counter with a glass of water in her hand, her fingers wrapped around it like she was reminding herself she was still here. Still steady, still in control. When she looked up at me, her expression wasn't what I expected. It wasn't anger. It wasn't panic. It was something sharper. Recognition. How long? She asked. Her voice didn't tremble. 6 weeks, I said. She nodded once, absorbing that. You planned all of this. Not a question. A statement. I leaned against the counter across from her, folding my arms loosely just to give my hands somewhere to rest. I planned to play the recording during the toasts, I said. The pregnancy announcement wasn't part of it. Her mouth twitched slightly. She moved the timeline. She did. A pause. Then my mother let out a breath that sounded like it had been sitting in her chest for the last 10 minutes, waiting for somewhere safe to land. You're terrifying, she said. There was no accusation in it. Just truth. I'm an estate attorney, I replied quietly. I prepare for outcomes. She studied me for a long moment. Then she said something that broke through the last layer of control I had been holding on to. Your father would be proud of you. Not for the exposure, not for the humiliation. For the protection. That was the part that mattered. I nodded once, then excused myself before the emotion had time to climb any higher. I went into the bathroom, locked the door, and let myself cry. 3 minutes. That was all I gave it. 3 minutes to let the sound out, to let the pressure release, to let the version of me who had loved Liam fully and blindly finally understand that she had been living beside a stranger. Then I washed my face, looked at myself in some mirror, and went back out. Because the part of me that had planned this didn't get to disappear just because the emotional part had caught up. Monday morning, Liam found the divorce papers. He had been served 2 hours before the party. A courier delivered them to his office, placed neatly into his briefcase under the assumption it was client material. He hadn't checked. Of course he hadn't. He came straight to the party instead. Straight into the moment where everything was waiting for him. He called me 4 times. Texted 11. I didn't answer any of them. I didn't need to. Sabrina did. Her response to his lawyer was precise. Mrs. Cole has retained this office for all matters regarding the dissolution of her marriage. All further communication is to be directed here. No direct contact will be accepted. Clean. Professional. Final. His lawyer called her that afternoon. My client is interested in discussing reconciliation. Sabrina didn't hesitate. There is a recorded conversation of your client planning to defraud his wife through financial manipulation, she said. Reconciliation is not on the table. A pause. Then, calmly, an expedited, uncontested divorce is the only path that doesn't escalate this into a fraud complaint. Silence on the other end. Then, I'll advise my client to cooperate. He did. Of course he did. Because for the first time since I had known him, Liam wasn't the one controlling the outcome. He signed everything. No contest. No delays. No negotiations. He took what was his clothes, his car, his personal accounts totaling just over $18,000. That was it. 6 years of marriage, 2 years of planning, a full strategy built around deception, manipulation, and timing. And it ended with $18,000 and a reputation that wouldn't recover. Brooke's pregnancy was real. She confirmed it. Due in October. She moved into a rented room in a shared house, paying $700 a month. The red dress she wore to my mother's party? She returned it the next day. I don't know if that detail should have mattered, but it did. Because it told me everything about the illusion she had been living inside. Liam moved in with a college friend. $900 a month for a couch and a living room. A financial advisor, sleeping on someone else's furniture. The irony would have been satisfying if it didn't also feel so hollow. His firm found out within the week. Someone at the party knew someone at the office. The recording made its way to the managing partner. They didn't fire him immediately. They started an ethics investigation, which is worse. Suspended. Waiting. Watching his own career hang in place while a group of people documented exactly why he couldn't be trusted with anyone else's money. His father called me, a week after everything. Savannah, Clyde said, his voice heavy with something deeper than anger. What my children did, it doesn't represent us. I know, I said. Because I did. He had walked out. That told me everything I needed to know. We're ashamed, he continued. My wife hasn't stopped crying. About the baby. About you. About all of it. I closed my eyes briefly, not to block it out, just to steady it. They made their choices, I said. You didn't make them for them. He was quiet for a second. Then he asked, Can I ask you something? Yes. When you played that recording, in front of everyone, a pause. Were you scared? I thought about it. Not the moment itself. The 6 weeks before it. The silence. The planning. The waiting. No, I said finally. I was prepared. He let out a breath. You're the strongest woman I've ever met, he said. My son was too foolish to see that. My mother and I redrafted her estate again. Stronger, cleaner, more protected. We built layers into it this time. A structure that ensured that any future inheritance would pass through a controlled system with independent oversight. No spouse. No manipulation. No access without accountability. A fortress. The kind my father's money should have been inside from the beginning. Liam sent one last message, through his lawyer. It was forwarded to Sabrina. Then to me. I made the worst mistake of my life. I love Savannah. What I did with Brooke was stupid, and I regret it. I'm losing everything. My career, my family, my marriage. If she would consider speaking to me, I'd appreciate the chance to apologize. I read it once. That was enough. Sabrina looked at me. No response? I handed the phone back. File it. No reply. No acknowledgement. Nothing. Because apologies don't rebuild something that was never real to begin with. That night, I had dinner with my mother. Just us. In her kitchen. The same kitchen where I learned how to cook. Where my father used to stand behind me and correct the way I held a knife. Where life had once felt simple. Are you okay? She asked. Not casually. Carefully. I will be, I said. And that was the truth. Not yet. But I could see the shape of it. She smiled faintly. Then said, I keep thinking about the way you walk to the speakers. I raised an eyebrow. You look so calm, she continued. Like you were about to play music. I was, I said. She tilted her head slightly. The truth just sounds different. She laughed. Soft. Real. The first time since the party. And in that moment, sitting across from her, I understood something that Liam never had. He thought I was predictable, because I was consistent. Because I believed in structure. In rules. In preparation. What he didn't understand was that the same woman who builds protections knows exactly how to dismantle the people who try to break them. My marriage lasted 6 years. Their plan lasted 2. The recording lasted 4 minutes and 11 seconds. And that was all it took.